Hello, my name is Luigi Ferrara. I'm the Dean for the Center for Arts Design and Information Technology and the Chair and CEO of the Brookfield Sustainability Institute here at George Brown College. And I'm thrilled that you've all come to be part of our Digifest Dialogues and BSI Summit, which begins this evening and carries out in frenzy tomorrow throughout the day. And so I'm welcoming you on behalf of our president, Dr. Gervin Firan, and we have with us tonight as well Michael Herrera, who's our senior VP and who will be addressing us tomorrow morning. And we have members of the GBC faculty, some students, people from different walks of life, different disciplines, and people from the McLuhan Foundation as well. So it's a very diverse group of people that are here this evening, and with special guests from across the country and around the world. So as we start, I want to call on Chef David Wolfman to do our land acknowledgement. I just want to say a little bit about him. He's the director of our Indigenous initiatives at GBC, but he's also an alumni of George Brown College, but more importantly, he's a professor of culinary arts at George Brown. He's internationally recognized expert in wild game and traditional Indigenous cuisine. He's a member of the Hulluk First Nations in British Columbia and a winner of the 2022 Inspired Awards for Leadership in the Arts. He also had his own television show, Cooking with the Wolfman. And without further ado, Chef Wolfman, please.
Wow, thank you very much. It's like an advert for me, right? So hello, welcome everybody. Anis, go, wache, bonjour, tanse. My name is David Wolfman, and I'm a proud member of the Hulluk First Nation in British Columbia, and a proud graduate, as Luigi had mentioned, in the class of 1980. So when I graduated, I was 3. So we respectfully acknowledge the land on which we are gathered is the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, the Huron-Wendat, the Mississauga, the Credit First Nation, and as well as many other people who have lived here and continue to live here. Toronto was also abundant with diverse wildlife, including deer, rabbits, beaver. I still have rabbits in my backyard and deer, and various birds, and I don't eat them. But the waters of Toronto was also very rich with salmon. We really think of a land acknowledgement. We want to think of the connection to the land. So it's not just about that we are recognizing somebody lived in this land, but it's all the connections of the land. For example, if you look at Davenport Avenue, used to have a creek running down there. And that creek was formed by larger animals walking down there, where eventually water would fill in, and the various indigenous people followed that water down to the main lake, down to Lake Ontario as we know it. And there, not only was it just about following the water to find our food, but it was actually a place of, when we think of hospitality, where I'm from, which is a hospitality division, we think of all of the different groups of people that met along the way. So again, it's the spirit of not just the people and just our land, but everything else that happened in between. So today, Toronto is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis people. And may we honor the enduring presence of the deep cultural heritage of our Indigenous people and recognize their stewardship of this land and its waterways throughout our history from here on in. I want to say thank you very much for this fantastic opportunity for me to be up here, and enjoy the rest of the evening. Thank you.
Thanks, Chef Wolfman. So tonight is a special night. Last May, the BSI was officially launched. It's a new institute at George Brown College, the Brookfield Sustainability Institute, made possible by the donation to Limberlost Place by Jack Cockwell. And it's built on the original 20 years of work of our Institute Without Boundaries. But as you know, the climate crisis has become more significant, ever more significant year by year. When we started the Institute Without Boundaries in 2002, people were aware of the climate crisis. People have been working on it, for 50 years prior. But I can't tell you how much more conscious people are now than it was then when we started the Institute Without Boundaries, and how much more urgent the situation really is. And so the Brookfield Sustainability Institute that we founded is really focused on developing applied solutions that can be brought to market by having our students and our faculty and a league of innovators from around the world and just people of goodwill working together to try to bring the solutions that we need to make a meaningful difference in the future. So we have a global solutions studio where we're creating solutions. We have an observatory where we're finding and documenting the solutions that are out there and publishing about new solutions and determining what more needs to be done. And we have education programs where we're taking graduate students into graduate certificate programs where they earn and learn because they work in our Global Solutions Studio, and then they work on major research projects. And that's part of why we're here together tonight, because over the day and a half that we're working on the summit, we're trying to discover what are the problems that we need to solve and what are the new formats that we need to create for caring, living, sharing that will make a difference for us moving forward. So that's the purpose and the function of this event. And it's a thrill to see you all here and to see people still making their way in. And I know that many, many people are online, and many, many more people are coming tomorrow to be part of this brainstorming, co-creation, and collaboration to create the research agenda for the Brookfield Sustainability Institute moving forward. Tonight, you're going to meet some of the people that you'll be working with. We have our facilitators who are here, Eric Muirkamper, Christina Werner, and Jane Cooklauder, who are super experts in facilitating. You'll meet Karen Carter, who is organized the panel tonight and is part of our BSI team. You're going to meet Jacob Kessler, and you're going to meet the many students that are involved in the IDSP program who are working to help facilitate the Charrette over the next few days, including students from the Politecnico in Milan, because at the BSI, we don't believe that we should create barriers and boundaries. We want to collaborate globally with everyone, including many of the guests that we have here tonight, who are from all over the country and other parts of the world, and who are working on solutions. And I'd say tonight's panel is really special because it's about those interesting and I would say weak signals that are actually about the important change that needs to happen in the future. And I think Karen has deliberately curated the projects so that they reflect some key issues that I believe should provoke us and heighten and elevate our thinking over the next day as to what we really need to do and we really need to achieve and what we need to work on. So I would like to invite Karen Carter up to sort of lead off the event. I just want to say a little bit about her. She has been an executive in the cultural sector for a long time, including running Heritage Toronto for over 25 years. But she's the founding executive director of the Museum, and she is a co-founder of the Black Artists Network and Dialogue, which is known as BAND. And she's a member of our team, and it's a privilege to work with her, as I have in the past, as she brings what I think is true creative thinking to the work that she does. So Karen, I'll hand it over to you, and you can take it away from here.
Thank you, Luigi. Look at that, I turn my back and the room fills in. We're going to jump right into it out of respect for your time, and especially for those of you who are coming back bright and early in the morning. I'm going to ask that colleagues who are physically here with me, Johnson, Sugu, and Cheryll, come up and take the 3 seats right next to me, and we'll jump right in. As Luigi mentioned, I upset the apple cart with the creative thinking that sometimes y'all love and sometimes you don't love, but I think in this case it worked out. And it was the process that BSI had previously was with a keynote speaker, but as you've all seen, this idea of the 3 streams, I thought it might be interesting to hear from 3 case studies. And then for those of you who know me, know my bias when it comes to diversity and equity, and I thought an opportunity to bring some different voices. This country has really innovative things happening with Indigenous communities, and I'm lucky enough to know about the one that is you'll hear tonight about, that's in Northern Alberta. And then I'm Jamaican, so I know about Little Jamaica. I will say no more about that with respect to the work Cheryl's doing, but also I learned things in the research about CP planning. I didn't know about the firm. I knew about the activism around the work there, so excited to hear from her. And then another Jamaican plug. The Source Farm is a Jamaican initiative looking at food sustainability and insecurity out of St. Thomas, Jamaica. So we brought the Global South and Indigenous narratives to the discussion this evening, and I'm glad that Luigi's kind of signaled that we hope that that's part of what is threaded through the conversations tomorrow. I'm gonna stop talking now so that I can stick to the 40 minutes, because I think I might have just wasted 3 or 5. I'm gonna hand this microphone to you, Johnson, and I'm gonna shuffle behind you. Tell me how to do this, and I was like, sure, I can do it. Yeah, I know. I'm going to let you go ahead, and I might just use yours if I need to. I know how to turn that one on. Flick up. Perfect. I'm still afraid it's on. Okay. Johnson, I'm going to ask each of the representatives from the respective group to introduce themselves. We're going to begin with the Ways of Sharing, which is the project Fire Integra from Northern Alberta. And one of the 2 Indigenous elders, which is key to that project's formation, is here with us, Johnson, who's to my far right. The other, Lorne, who you'll see shortly on screen. As mentioned, this is a hybrid conversation because of travel and time and so forth. So I'll let Johnson begin just by talking a bit about the community and introducing himself to you.
Yeah, my name's Johnson from Northern Alberta, in the community of Little Red River. Yeah, and the reason why I'm here is looking for people to help us protect the buffalo and the buffalo habitat. And yeah, and the fires that are shrinking the land, and the industries that are making the habitat smaller for the buffalo. So we're just hoping to get reintroduced more buffalo in the area, and that asking for the government to help us do that. And I'm not sure, but I think they are working on it.
Lorne, do you want to throw in to talk a bit more about some of the aspects related to the land, and maybe throw the connection of how Sugu got connected with the team? Can we feature Lorne on the screen?
Okay. Hi, my name's Lorne Tallcree. I reside in Zone Door Prairie, Northern Alberta. I'm a member of the Little Red River Cree Nation. There's about 6,000 plus members, and we've been advocating for buffalo that these are wood buffalo. It's not plains bison, what they call, and we've been trying to get wildlife status for these animals. Like they weren't considered wildlife when we first started. Like it's a real I don't know how it's an eyesore, I guess. Like what I had seen in the forest, like when I was doing some tree planting for the nation, and these hunters, outfitters would come in there, and they would kill these buffalo. Like they weren't regulated; they weren't even considered wildlife, and they would take the skull, the head, and the hide. And that was not good. Like people in our membership weren't happy with that, because we use the buffalo for ceremonial purposes. We respect the animal, and it's a source of food security as well. Like in I have an old document from Parks Canada from 1980s, and it stated like in the area where we're trying to advocate these buffalo, there used to be about 150. Now there's only 6 left, and it's bad. It's like anybody can just go in there like before, and just start shooting for target practice. That's how bad it was. Until we started this Sagawaski, we formed between trappers, elders, knowledge keepers, and we finally convinced the Alberta government to try and put a stop to it. So that one area, it covers about 800,000 hectares, and we managed to save these 6 buffalo. That's.
Thank you, Lorne.
And yeah, Sugu, we had worked with him before through our login through the nation, and that's how we got involved with Sugu. He's our managing director of our company.
Thank you, Lorne. I'm going to throw to Sugu just to connect the dots between what you talked about with what's happening locally in the community and the danger that the buffalo's in, and how the development of Fire Integra is assisting with your work.
Oh. Hi, everyone. My name's Sugu Thurasaimy. I'm a forester. I've worked now with Johnson and Lorne for about 10 years. I think probably the best thing I can communicate here today is what I've learned working with them and working for them is that they already have the solutions on how to make things better. And those solutions is going to make all our lives better when it comes to climate change, because biodiversity is a kind of a thread that is a key indicator. If we're messing up biodiversity, we're messing up the climate. And on the buffalo, they knew long before everyone, the management, it was basically mismanagement that was happening. On fires, it's the situation's the same. And it took a lot of engagement, which no one will fund. It takes a lot of engagement to bring in a lot of different companies, individuals that learn about what's happening with the buffalo, for there to be actual awareness and change. Because if you don't highlight this issue, no one's going to do anything about it. And the same happens with the same issue is happening with respect to wildlife risk management. Even the government of Canada in 2005 released a report that said you have to do specific things, and we're 20 years later, and we didn't do those specific things. And it's exactly the same things the elders and the knowledge keepers were saying. So, like what we've done with the buffalo, to even list it as a species, a wildlife species, That was one of the things that we had to do. We're now working on the wildfire situation, and we have had to form a consortium of companies from Japan, the US, from Canada, and we have professionals working with us from Sweden, from Spain, Scotland. So we have a lot of people. We've basically had to form a group to tackle this, and now there are people hopefully willing to work with us here.
Starting to pay attention.
Yeah.
So that hits the international note that Luigi mentioned, that I think you'll see within the groups there are layers around community, both locally and internationally. I'm going to throw to Cheryll right beside me to talk a bit about that local element for the work that they're doing at CP Planning.
Yeah, thank you. So the work that we do at CP Planning, so we practice a human rights-based approach to planning, quickly tying in that international piece and how it's affected and guided our local implementation of our planning work, which is, a key priority of ours is to increase affordable housing supply. And how do you increase affordable housing supply? Well, a key part of that is to include local communities in the identification of the need for new supply, identification of land, bringing in resources to then transform land by generating new housing and supporting more communities to be part of the economy of building housing. And so the international piece comes in where, in terms of our approach and our ability to really understand the systems at play that guide what happens at the local level, the United Nations provides a really great body of guidance in terms of, we have in Canada a great privilege of the UN Rapporteur for affordable housing for a long while was actually from Ottawa. So we had Canadian influence in terms of setting the guidance around the intersection of housing and human rights. So they've done a lot of work describing that intersection. In Canada, we also have our National Housing Strategy Act that also says that housing is a human right, and it also guides for government to support, address for discrimination for marginalized communities, women, people of color, Indigenous peoples to have their housing needs met. And then here in Ontario, we're further privileged with the Ontario Human Rights Commission, who has extensive writing on the intersection of human rights, housing, and urban planning, right? So I said that, we are an urban planning firm that does human rights-based approach to planning. Well, what is urban planning? Simply said, it's the process for planning the development of land and how does that land function and what's the function for generating value from that land and what is the type of value that we're looking to generate. So, I opened up in talking about affordable housing. Well, what does affordable housing have to do with sustainability? Well, it has a lot to do with sustainability. When you're looking at developing within our means and being able to protect our beautiful wildlife and our green fields and to protect those things, we need to be able to conserve our development and really prioritize where we're developing so we don't have to be pushing out into removing those very important resources for our fellow inhabitants of this beautiful planet. And so at the local level, what we support is for communities to be able to actually then go out and identify, well, there's this nonprofit in my neighborhood who really cares about their community. What are they up to? Are they looking at building affordable housing? And so the more that we can support communities at the local level to be able to generate new supply, that will then reduce the risk of having to build out into other parts of our environment. And this portion around looking at how we develop doesn't just go at land development itself, it also looks into how we plan our transit, right? So we know that, biking, walking, these are two very low carbon ways of getting around. We also have the great value of a public transit infrastructure. So those of you from Toronto are familiar with the Eglinton Crosstown. And so what is the ways that we then look at shaping the land around transit. How can we ensure that as we build transit, we're actually able to then still support for the forestry around transit to be sustained? And then what are the processes that are in place, and what types of communities are able to have their voices heard and to have their neighborhoods be remain beautiful with access to green space? We've actually done studies and we found that in neighborhoods that were whiter and more affluent, they're more likely to be able to have that infrastructure built underground and to then protect the local forestry in the neighborhood, whereas neighborhoods that were lower income and that have more racialized communities, we're seeing actually that the local forestry is being cut down, and so seeing thousands of trees cut from neighborhoods and then contributing to heat island effects, which then impact the health and well-being of the people in the community.
Thank you for that. So the next time you're driving along Eglinton, things to consider. I'm gonna throw to the Source Farm, which is online from Jamaica, bringing in our International Connect. I'm gonna ask Nicola to begin to introduce the project. Alongside Nicola is a colleague who are working with her, a professor from the University of the West Indies, David, and Michelle, who's a Canadian expat who happened to move back to Jamaica and is working on this initiative. So Nicola, I'll throw to you to give us the intro for what you're doing with Source Farm.
Hello, good evening, everyone. And just so you know, we're having a little difficulty hearing what's going on in the room, but hopefully we'll be able to share. If you can
speak a bit louder for us. Can you be a bit louder, Nicola?
Yes, can you hear me now?
That's better, thank you.
Okay, great. Okay, good evening, everybody. We're saying good evening from sunny Jamaica. We're in the eastern tip of Jamaica, and it's off in the parish that's been left behind. It's the parish of St. Thomas. And so the Source Farm came to Jamaica to create a space for many Jamaicans that want to return home, but also for Jamaicans that are here to kind of almost create a think tank of how we were going to think our way and create our way out of the challenges that we're facing in Jamaica. A lot of post-colonialization and just a lot of challenges that we had after the elections and stuff from the 70s, 80s, and 80s that we had. And so the Source Farm itself is a multicultural, cultural, intergenerational eco-village. And we have a commitment to natural living, holistic health and spirituality, ecological stewardship, education sharing, organic farming, and arts and culture and permaculture. And so what we did was we got a piece of land with about 63 acres, and the family and friends and other people that were interested in more ecological living created and co-created a space for us to be able to learn from the environment, but also learn how do we live together again. Because remember, we came from different places to Jamaica. Jamaica is very much a amalgam of Chinese and Africans and indigenous people and Europeans, and how do we live together? And so what we did was start to see how to learn from the natural world and started to co-create a way to live together. So our presentation is about how do we care. And so we were looking at being on the land and creating a space for us to just breathe and learning how, again, to get it back into nature and looking at how do we design appropriate houses and work with the technology to create more balance and harmony. And also an opportunity for us to learn, again, how to communicate with each other. So using things like state of grace agreements, formal consensus, social bureaucracy. Also looking in the past using some of our indigenous knowledge, bringing it forward into the future, and learning how again to communicate and interact with each other. And that was very important for us in terms of trying to figure out how to co-create community. Another thing that we were doing is really tapping back into the ancestral knowledge of all the people that were there, whether we are coming from the traditional African roots, or if it's an Asian roots or an Indian. How do we bring all that forward and work in the space and time and co-create together? And again, another piece of this is to looking at us as individuals and being able to figure out what is our path in life and still be able to work in community. So out of all that work that we were doing, we co-created a number of projects. So we had the 1-1 cocoa farming project, which we do with organic farming and permaculture. We created a farmers market, which is the first and right now the only organic farmers market in Jamaica. We looked at how we lived and can we do more work with the natural land instead of a lot of the concrete. So we do earth bag building and domes, and we're looking at cob and just the way how we're interacting with the land. We looked at our wellness,
Nicola.
Creating a wellness center, again, looking at modern but also ancient traditional healing methodologies. We created a sewing cooperative for the community using natural dyes. We also are working on an organic research station where we're looking at indigenous plants and how do we interact again with the space in conservation, but how do we interact where we can wild harvest, but do it more sustainably?
Nicola, I'm going to jump in to transition to
with the not just the community that we've formed, but in a larger Jamaica.
Send a message for me, Jacob?
And of course,
there's always someone who doesn't listen to my timeline.
I'm getting a lot of
laughing,
feedback.
but it always happens. No. Hi, Nicola. I'm just going to jump in so we can transition to pull in the next question, because you're starting to talk specifically about some of the projects. And I want to start to unpack some of that as we move into the local element, because we talked about, everyone introduced the project. So now let's drill down a little bit. We don't have a lot of time, and we want to stick as close to the, I have to stick to time, not close to, sticking to time. So going over one place just means we lose time another place. I'm wondering whether or not it's best now to throw to a question that you could all pick up, maybe one of you picks up, instead of hearing from everybody, which is how important the local is. So for me, one of the threads that I thought was interesting when I was listening to all of you and hearing about your project was the importance of the local for an understanding of where Source Farm is in Jamaica. So your location in St. Thomas, which for those of you who've been to Jamaica, St. Thomas is probably a place you haven't heard of, and that's the reason. It's not as tourist-driven as other parts of the island is, and so the community, the work they're doing in community and its proximity to places like Kingston for things like food insecurity becomes super important. And in the case of the indigenous land connection, obvious when you're looking at the impact of the buffalo herd and, for instance, the wildfires. So I want to throw to just what the local, how important the local is. So you are all here because of your understanding, I would hope, of that local and global. Like, you probably have connections and knowledge about what is happening across sustainability globally as much as you know about what's happening locally. And it's how do you connect those threads so that if you're actually working on problem solving, that the problem solving is aware of location. So how important is location in the work that you do? Sugu or Johnson?
What's that?
Yeah. Do you want Cheryl to start?
Yeah.
Okay, so I'd say that the local is incredibly important, right? So in the work that we do when it comes to identifying a site for affordable housing development, like we're working directly with property owners on that topic. We're going to be working directly with the local elected officials on it as well, right? Because they're going to be the key to the local city staff who are tasked with helping to address the housing crisis, to improve sustainability from an environmental standpoint as well. And so being able to then translate what's happening on the local level and also empower folks on the local level to be able to make those connections, build those relationships, and synthesize and understand the information at the local level, and then bring it up to the province, to the federal government, who have that access to resources to pool and to direct to actually to deliver on building that infrastructure that is required to meet these targets. And also really important to say that at an international level, right, like housing sustainability is something that we see as common in so many countries across the world. So by being able to test out and pilot and synthesize what is the key items for success, and to be able to generate success enables for folks to be able to look and say, okay, it's worked over there, then we can be validated and we're on the right path. Someone has done this before. Or even being able to pick up tips and tricks on how to do the work, right? So we've looked at folks in the United States to see their approaches. There's been really great approaches in Europe in terms of also how do you engage the local communities in the planning of their neighborhoods. So that would be the connection for me in terms of that local and the international. Yeah.
So how to understand the international well enough to implement it locally.
Yeah, and I think another thing is we have the SDG goals as well by the United Nations, who has clear targets around sustainability, environmental, and also inclusivity in terms of the process, right? Having diverse peoples involved. So this is something that at the international level, there's a very clear framework, right, that we can then also draw from and then collectivize, be collective in our approach to move forward on these items.
Sugu?
Yeah, I think what I see a lot of international companies and larger companies struggling with is putting in capital into projects, and is it going to deliver the results that they're promised? And I don't think you can have that kind of sustainability assurance without having the deep local engagement and deep local follow-through in those promises. And so basically the plan has to be developed at the local level, and then the local team has to monitor, deliver on it. That's the link, because from our perspective, from a resource management stewardship perspective, I don't see how you have sustainability assurance without locals developing the plan and executing the plan and making sure that the plan is delivered.
Thank you for that. I was trying to go through and sneak the screen so we look super, but it's not working. Is it? Okay, David, I know you are there, although we might not be able to see you. Professor at the University of the West Indies. I wonder if you can pick up that thread to talk a bit about some of the work you're doing as it connects to students and the encouragement of projects that are concept to completion that you think should be happening there, especially as we sit in an academy. And our gathering is about also helping to create some opportunities for students here in Canada.
Sure. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, perfect. So picking up on what Nicola was saying, the particular aspect of Source Farm is called GWG, and that's a research station, botanical research station, or organic research station. It's 370 acres. And we're really at the early stages So the University of the West Indies, based at Mona campus in Kingston in Jamaica, has just signed a memorandum of understanding. So the plan really is to look at, particularly in the area I focus on, which is botanical medicine. And Jamaica has a very long history of medicinal plant use. Going back several hundred years, people have relied, 70% of our population continue to rely on botanical medicine. So a big part really of the university's role is to bring the science to support that traditional use. But then also the challenge that we've got is there's still very much an extractive model that exists where, you know, people will come to Jamaica, they'll identify interesting plants, they will bioprospect, and that information will often lead to the development of drugs further down the road. What we're trying to do is actually bring that traditional knowledge and bring a lot of the research back into Jamaica. But what I guess we're doing slightly differently now is, rather than the bioprospecting aspect, is actually how do we develop those plant medicines locally for local use? So where people are starting to move away from that traditional knowledge, reinvigorate that traditional knowledge, bring it back, but then also bring our own students and the science behind that use of medicinal plants to start to develop some of those medicinal plants as nutraceuticals, because the nutraceutical industry is very large. So that's really where we're doing it. And then the challenge is as many of the botanicals become very popular, how do you do that sustainably? So we want to embed that sustainable model that exists, particularly in other countries, into everything that we do, working as the university and working at a local level with traditional practitioners and traditional knowledge holders.
Thank you for that. I'm wondering whether or not we should throw, if there's any questions or comments in the room. Anybody? Okay, I'll just, yes?
Oh, absolutely.
Hold on to the mic.
So thanks, Karen. For the Source Farm folks in Jamaica, I know that this is a pilot. You're working on, you know, sustainability, conserving like you know, indigenous plants, and kind of finding sustainable ways of living. But how replicable is the solution or the solutions that you've been implementing based on where Jamaica is today, and considering other issues like, you know, climate change, poverty, neocolonialism, all of these other factors that are, you know, driving how people experience life in these environments? How replicable and how realistic do you see your current solution as being for the rest of the Jamaican population? Like, how do you scale something like this, essentially?
I don't know if you want to speak to it, David, or if Nicola or Michelle.
Sorry,
just repeat it for Nicola. The scalability of the solution at a national level.
Well, yes. Well, actually, it's interesting. I think we always are trying to look at scale, and what I think that we should be looking at is not necessarily always trying to scale everything. I think that for plants show up where you need them to show up. So some of the work that we'll be doing, even with the farmers and the farmers market, is to be able to work in the regions that we go into. So if we're working in St. Thomas or Kingston, St. Andrews, let's work with that region first, work with that region, and the plants that are needed for that area is going to appear. And you may go to another section, another island, and the plants and things that are needed for is in that space as well. And I think because we keep thinking that we have to be this global thing where everything is being transported all this across these miles and all that stuff, that's the way it should be. But we really are rethinking about it in terms of Can we be more local, regionally, and make sure that the people and the things that are in that region is really appropriate for those people? And can we create livelihoods that will allow us to be able to live where we work, live and work where we are? And it's like in Source Farm is a good example of that, is that we are living, working, and playing in our communities and creating a livelihood that we can then maybe go to a little distance,
Nicola.
maybe to Kingston, to be able to sell. And if people want to come to us, they can do that. I think that sometimes we want to scale things that's maybe not maybe the most appropriate way. I don't know if that answers your question.
Sorry, Nicola, there was an echo, so I didn't hear some of that, but we'll get an opportunity probably tomorrow in the smaller groups to maybe dive in a bit more. Maybe check and see if there's something with your sound, because the first time you spoke, it was fine, but there was an echo that time. Sir, your name, I didn't get it.
Yeah, thank you. My name is Mohammed. Pleasure to be here, and thank you very much for putting this together. My question is to Cheryl and potentially to Sugu as well. You touched upon the Sustainable Development Goals and the relationship to sustainable planning, including housing affordability and equity there. I did my master's on Canada's 2030 agenda that includes the Canadian Indicator Framework for the SDGs. It includes the government implementation plan and the reviews, the national reviews that the government has been putting out. I've also looked at some of the local reviews. And my question here is, do you see like data-driven decision-making in making that kind of progress towards the SDGs, towards 2030 and hopefully beyond, an issue at the local level? Because one of the challenges I faced while doing my research was the lack of disaggregated data that is locally relevant to plan around. So I invite you to do so, if you go to StatsCan's, the Canadian Indicator Frameworks portal, and you try to disaggregate that data for most of these indicators, it only goes down to the provincial level. So like, Ontario, British Columbia, et cetera. And I wonder if you think that there would be value to the idea of disaggregating that data further, since you work in Toronto or other, like more like at the city level, so that people can kind of touch and feel those data points and therefore kind of, interact with them more productively. Sorry, maybe that was all kind of a long and winded question.
It's okay, that's why I'm lingering here, so. But I don't need to summarize it, I think. You guys are good? Okay.
Yeah. So that's a great question, right? Like, so we need to improve the data that we have so that we can make better decisions. So I think that question around data, data is always really valuable in terms of helping us make decisions. One thing that I've noticed as well is that there's a lot of data that we have that can point us in a direction of where to go, and we, as a collective, as a society, are not following the direction of that data, right? So in terms of additional data collection, what type of data do I think would help us to address the housing crisis, sustainability crises? I think collecting data on let's say the number of people who are working on building the solution, I think would be something, because in terms of the economy of generating housing supply, the economy of building a more sustainable environment, these economies are much smaller than what they ought to be, right? We don't have enough people out there protecting the buffalo in Alberta. We don't have enough people planting trees. We don't have enough people who are looking for sites to build and trying to find financial solutions to build new housing supply. And so by setting targets for that labor pool and then being able to track progress around that labor pool, but would, I think, be one of the indicators to help us to address that issue, because sometimes what I've found is that we get really good at describing how bad it is, but then even with knowing how bad it is, the movement is not happening. So knowing how many people we have in the labor pool, but then also what kinds of skills do they have, right? Like in terms of accreditation or skills, some kind of way of verifying skills around supporting economic development, natural processes in terms of planting, so making sure that the labor pool is actually equipped to apply the skills that are required to generate what is intended from that investment in their labor, I think would help us get a bit further than adding more data about how bad it is, because we know it's really, really bad.
So is
what's
it about
missing is the labor to address that issue.
Yeah, so the link from the data to action, maybe is that thread. Sugu, do you want to say? We're coming to close to an end, so if did you want to comment, question? I'll let Sugu go and then throw to you next.
I think it's a very good question, and and we're working with some very large data companies, IT companies, and data is great, but without action, it's not going to happen. So and to get action, you really need to essentially become an activist, because we've known the problems for quite some time, whether it's on the buffalo or the wildfires. There's a lot of data on both. And it depends who. You can talk to a lot of people, and they can say, yeah, okay, but then you have to raise the awareness of it, and that means engaging with a really wide group, and who can help echo the trapper's voice to the world. Otherwise, data, it's great. You can have more data, and it's useful. We've seen really good results when the data can be illustrated in a way that make it simple for anyone to understand. And then you can get a wide awareness, and then you can get some, what we say, moral action, because a lot of these issues are moral issues. And if people don't know about it, there's not going to be any action at all.
Good points. Moral action. No, you can
stand up. Yeah, I've got a fairly large mouth, big mouth. I'm sorry. I don't really need this. Hi, my name is Pam Shanehouse, and I'll stand up because I'm short. No, I'm good. Okay. Thanks. Anyway, hi everybody. My expertise is in accessibility, inclusion, diversity. And I'd like to know, I haven't heard one word from the way you're talking. I'm talking, I don't remember your name. I apologize, I don't mean to be pointing. Cheryl? Cheryl. Yeah. About people with disabilities and how they're accepted within your environment, and also with the source farm. Because what's happening now is, I will speak, I can walk without this walker, okay? I have a walker. When I'm with the walker, I have a disability. When I'm not walking, nobody knows that I have an invisible disability. This is an area that you really need to find a line, whether it's that people are accepted, because it's happening all the time, and people are like 1 in 4 here in Canada. I don't know what it is in Jamaica.
Accessibility as it relates to the planning sector, which I feel like is a huge question for one person to address in this moment, but maybe you can see if you want to tap a little bit into it.
Yeah, sure. So I think I really appreciated your response around, like, it's a moral question. I think the matter of accessibility is very similarly as well, right? So, accessible spaces, inclusive design, these are things that should be considered on a daily basis. And in Ontario, we have, building standards, but what we find is that when you build to code, actually they're still not accessible to folks, right? So in terms of, having new development or refurbishing development to be accessible, having public spaces be accessible in terms of the design of spaces, these are things that do matter to us very, very much at CB Planning, and we're actually building out a project to support for these considerations to be further integrated into the way that we look at building cities. So, when I've talked about inclusivity, oftentimes, what we've prioritized in much of our work has been around lower income communities, racialized communities, and when you look at income, people with disabilities or who may be neurodivergent or have mental health challenges are more likely to be lower income, right? So this is naturally a demographic that is very much a core priority for us for that reason of that intersectionality there. So I hope that somewhat addresses the question. So yeah, I don't know if that addresses the question, but it definitely is an important part of the movement. And
definitely.
Yeah.
And I think the note there is the intersectionality, is that, like it or not, all of this work is about the layers of, you scratch the layer and there's another layer and there's another layer. And that's, again, kind of back to the notion of the local, what are the needs in the local community? So, and how can you look at macro data, information, best practices to impact some of the decision-making you might do locally?
I just have one other thing. I'm sure everybody can hear me. The way I do it, because the work that I do, I call it AID, because if you don't have an accessible workplace, then inclusion, diversity, and equity, it's a whole package deal. But
Agreed.
accessibility is right at the top of it. And that's the work that I do. So anyway, thank you for your answers. I appreciate it.
Should we try and throw a last word to the screen and hope for no echo? And then we'll wrap up. I don't know about you, but this hybrid situation, it is difficult. But I will applaud the George Brown team. If you were here this afternoon when we were like no sound and sound, they're geniuses. They've done an amazing job. And I don't know if you want to say something, Michelle, because we haven't heard your voices yet, to talk a bit about some of the work that may be hitting intersectionality, maybe around class, as well as diversity and accessibility, if some of the work that Source Farm may be doing in that way, or its connection to the local community, low-income communities.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Great. Okay. Just a little bit of challenge on this end. Really what I can say about Source, I do work with the Source and live within the community. I work as the media director. And the way the village has been designed using principles of sociocracy, echo.
You're frozen. Say it isn't so. I know, what a time to get hurt. Sociocracy.
And we have work
I want to know what sociocracy is. Are you back, Michelle? We lost you at sociocracy.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
You hear me now? Let me save my bandwidth. I don't know what is happening. 1 second.
There you go. Sociocracy.
Here we go. Right. So the Source Farm Eco Village is a very intentional community. And the way it has been designed is just so brilliant, with the permaculture design principles. And then in terms of working as a community, using a system called sociocracy, which the Source and its partners train in when possible. So accessibility in terms of making everybody have access is done here, as well as diversity. We're very diverse. There's people from all over the world living here in the village. Myself, I'm an ex-Torontonian, fortunate enough to get to come here and work here and participate and learn here in the community. I don't know if I've answered a question. It's been a little bit difficult to hear on our end, but the Source is doing amazing work. As a journalist, I try to amplify the work here and help with design and marketing and different content creation things. But what is really wonderful is the Source is leading by example. One of the things Nicola didn't even mention is, out of all her work in organics and with the GWG Organic Research Station, is now she is advising the government on soil health with a new project called Genesis, which means they're going to go all around the country and get people learning how to get back to more natural ways of growing, which is not only beneficial for our food supply, but also our environment and also the oceans and our waterways. So the source is amazing in terms of the work it's doing and leading by example.
Thank you
and
so much
starting
for that.
small, but continuing to expand and go out further with its work.
Thank you so much for that. I feel like we're all ready to stand up, mingle, talk to each other. I will give you the option if you want to stay on the screen, but I feel like that would be mean to watch us having something to eat and mingling. Thank you all for taking the time. Thank you, Lorne. Are they gone? Thank you. Thank you all for taking the time. I'm going to throw back to Luigi to have closing remarks.
I want to thank the panelists both in person and online. I think it's an indication of the kind of situation that we're in. Over the years at the Institute Without Boundaries, whenever we were drawn into a problem, it was usually a problem that was stemming from a dissonance between the global and the local. We went to Costa Rica, and we found that there were people there that had locally been taking care of the turtles to make sure that they were breeding and that the turtle population was thriving. But then the NGO in New York took over the work, and therefore it wasn't happening on the ground. They were making a global impact in awareness, but then the actual work wasn't being done. And when I think of the project of Fire Integra, I think, it's a perfect encapsulation because, if we're thinking of the local community there and not just the people who live there, but all the wildlife that live there, by helping them, we ultimately help all of us because, the fire then, with the wind, takes pollutants everywhere. So it's this, issue, and there's challenges because, as we see, it doesn't necessarily all yet work. We have to come up with the new models. But I think that was what was really exciting about the different case studies. When I think of what the Source Farm's doing, I grew up in North York, and I had a farm in my backyard that my parents used to tend while they went to work in Toronto in their industrial jobs, and I would have to work with them at the end of the day coming back from school. But there is incredible wisdom from tradition that I believe is a key part of sustainability. And I know it because it made our family have food security, and it gave us enough money, because we were low-income people, to actually afford me to have an education and get a different life, right? So it's interesting how these issues keep coming back, and actually how we need to think about how do we preserve that traditional wisdom, how do we use it to help us change our society and make it more equitable, and also how we help us build a better future with it. So I think that was very interesting in the Source Farm's work. And then in Cheryl's work, I think, there are all these major global projects that are being done for sustainability reasons, but we know that they can't be truly sustainable until they start to consider all the different communities that they're affecting and that they're part of. And so we know we have to build them. We know we have to build huge public transit, but we have to do it in the right way, right? And we know we have to build huge energy projects, but we have to do them in the right way. So you can see that this is the seed of very interesting discussion that we're going to be extending as we head into tomorrow morning, and where we are starting to think of what are these new and interesting formats. How will we imagine our society working in the future? It's interesting, it's a sociocracy, that was a term I've never heard before. But how do we imagine our society in ways where we create more beneficial conditions for all of us, including other fellow creatures on Earth, and in humans and our societies, and you know, thinking back to Chef Wolfman's acknowledgement at the start, for generations, for future generations, you know, how do we make, how do we really connect in a positive way? Borrowing a term from Ian Forster. So I just thank you for all coming. I hope that you will stay, mingle a bit, and tomorrow morning starts at 9 o'clock. There's, I think, breakfast served at 8:30, and let me just look to make sure I've told everybody what they need to know. And I just please. Oh, it's on the board. So please mix and mingle, and looking forward to talking and learning from you as I learned tonight from the people who came. Thank you so much. Okay.